So a rational being at first could, when faced with a boulder, step on it and reach a higher level, or use it to build the foundations of a house, or turn it into many useful things that could contribute to their growth. Well, I don't quite have the level yet to know how to use all the stones in my life for useful things and to make myself grow. So I will have to keep growing despite it. When we know how to learn from difficulties, we grow because of them. When we don't know, we grow despite them. But in any case, no obstacle could take away our duty to continue growing as human beings. Hello, welcome. Let's continue our reading of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor. Today we will look at books 8 and 9, and in our next meeting we will cover books 10, 11, and 12. And we'll conclude this pleasant journey together. I hope, as I always reiterate, that you are reading along, because this reading is indispensable, so that you can make your own reflections. Let's begin then with the 8th book. If you have truly come to understand what matters, you will not concern yourself with the reputation you might gain, but simply live the rest of your life as nature intends. Notice something interesting. At some point we have to come to the conclusion of what truly matters. What holds value in life? What is essential in life? And then the violent expenditure of energy we have on absolutely trivial things becomes completely unfeasible, becomes completely surpassed. Marcus Aurelius himself, at the beginning of the book, we see this. He talks about men who were highly recognized and grand, and today no one remembers them anymore. In other words, live your life. Trying to gain fame for a personality that in a few years is dust is the most vain way to live your life. But sooner or later, we must have this awakening of consciousness and realize what truly matters in life, so that our future life is guided by these real values. Are you searching for this moment? Look, this is the most fundamental achievement of our lives. Absolutely nothing is good for a person if it doesn't make them more just, wise, strong, and free. Absolutely nothing is an evil to you when it doesn't produce spices contrary to these virtues. Do you notice how interesting that is? Because it's another way to judge the facts. That was good for me. Hold on, it might have been pleasant for you, but good, maybe it wasn't. Well, it's that which makes you grow as a human being. And bad is that which makes you regress as a human being. In other words, moving towards a greater bestiality. Distancing oneself from human values, from human potentials, from the latent powers that every person carries within. So, sometimes, for example, when we are in a dispute and we are the unjust party, the best thing that could happen to us is to be defeated. Because being victorious in error will only feed that error within us. It will become doubly more difficult to overcome it. Besides generating, as the Hindus would say, negative karma. In other words, when we succeed in things that aren't just noble and good, no matter how much they bring us joy, in reality, it was a loss. The good is what makes you grow as a human being. In light of human values, the evil that distances you from these values. It becomes quite simple to classify things in this life. And sometimes, what is the hardest is considered perhaps one of the best things that happened to us, for it made us grow. Think about that for a moment. And this allows us to reorganize our entire judgment about our life. Continuing. With every act, question yourself. What consequences have come to me? Will I regret what I did? In a short time, I will be dead. Everything will come to an end. If my present action is in accordance with the nature of the intelligible and sociable being, whose law is God, what more could I wish for? Be it so, if my action is consistent with the Dharma of the Hindus, if it aligns with the order of the universe, if it makes me take a step towards God, a step towards the human ideal, then it is good in itself. There isn't much to consider. Furthermore, and always Marcus Aurelius, with this idea of death as a counselor. If I were to die tomorrow, would this act I just did be a gain or a loss? Contrast gives rise to awareness, remember. When we place our consciousness, hypothetically, in the face of death, it clearly allows us to see what is valuable on this side, what is real and what is mere shadow illusion and alienation. In other words, these are criteria for discernment. What are Alexander, Caesar, and Pompey in the face of Diogenes, Heraclitus, and Socrates? Behold, these latter ones knew things, their causes, their nature, and always kept their souls free. But those, what could they foresee? How many have enslaved themselves? In other words, notice that he places two groups of men. Some were envied and praised throughout their lives, but after their death, the benefit they brought to humanity was questionable. They were three grand generals, right? Alexander, Caesar, and Pompey. Three generals who, in their time, were considered enviable. But did they contribute as much to the advancement of their own consciousness and to humanity over the centuries as three simple men? Like Diogenes, Heraclitus, and Socrates, three philosophers who spent their lives waging an inner war. And they were victorious in many things. And they left the path illuminated for those who also wished to achieve that victory. Remember, once again, a passage from a sacred book, which is the Dhammapada. For those who have already watched this lecture, there is a passage called the Yamakasvaga, or more than 1,000. More than the one who defeats 1,000 men in battle, victorious is the one who conquers himself. Your bad tendencies, your vices, your brutality, your animalistic nature. More victorious, stronger, happier is the one who stands tall. Over their vices, over their flaws, standing upright, as is expected of a human being. Funny, because sometimes only time allows us to see that. After centuries, we see what was worthwhile and what wasn't. Philosophers are still useful to us even today. The others, very debatable, isn't it? Only time, but when we engage in an exercise of consciousness and place ourselves in the future, thinking about the impact it will have on humanity centuries from now, this exercise of imagination also helps us to perceive more clearly what was valuable in our current time. What is real? What will make a difference? What will be a contributing factor to history? And it's important every now and then to have this shift in consciousness and reflect. Here, he refers to an elderly person. Of course, in our time, we have already advanced a lot. A person of any age can have a pair of glasses and be able to read and read until the end of your life. Here, there was still this difficulty. A person with vision problems in advanced age could no longer read. So understand within this context. Read you can no longer. Suppress pride, however, you can. To rise above pleasures and pains, you can. To place yourself above vainglory, you can. Not holding grudges against the insensitive and ungrateful. And before that, being useful to them, you can. Notice the parallel with another lecture that I highly recommend, which is the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which speaks exactly about this. As long as there is life, there is an opportunity for improvement and learning. Because at a certain point, if we tie a ball of steel to our ankle and can't take another step, it means life has ended there. It's time to die. And life carries out according to the customer's request. These are my words, evidently. But what this book says is that as long as there is life, there is an opportunity for learning. You can't read, but there are countless other ways to learn. You can reflect and learn from each content of life, asking yourself, what do you bring me so that I can become a human being better? Have you ever asked this question to your problems? to the events of everyday life. What do you bring me so that I can become a human being? Better. After all, what Marcus Aurelius is offering are pieces of advice for the betterment of man. Whenever you hesitate to get out of bed, remember that it is particularly in line with your constitution and your human nature to perform actions useful to society, while sleeping is something you share with irrational animals. Therefore, what directly corresponds to the nature of each being is more suitable, easier, and even more pleasant. Here comes a very important element, which is the refinement of taste. Learning to savor what is human, to feel its flavor, and to realize that there is nothing more delightful for a person than a genuine act of compassion, true honesty, authentic kindness, and fraternity. Learning to refine taste and savor human nature. And to understand an inexorable law of nature, which states that each being fulfills itself by being what it is. By being human, we have the happiness of men, which is what befits us, and surely it is the most suitable for us. Don't forget that just as it would be foolish for someone to be amazed that a fig tree bears figs, it is equally foolish to be astonished that the world produces what it is meant to produce. Similarly, it would be no less foolish for a doctor to be surprised by someone with a fever, or for a captain to be taken aback by a contrary wind. So, being incredibly surprised by human nature undoubtedly indeed means that you truly haven't applied yourself enough to the most important subject of your life. Behind any knowledge, there lies the possibility of better understanding oneself. To better understand what it means to be a human being. Because if knowledge isn't coupled with the possibility of going beyond and through it, gaining a better understanding of oneself and humanity, as a whole, it has become just a technical learning with very limited efficiency. Through any knowledge, you should be able to get closer to yourself. And notice how interesting what he says is. If we understand human nature, we know that it is a mixture of the human self with the animal self. And therefore, the humanity you encounter on the street is a result of this mixture. To know that, at least according to the configuration we have in this historical moment, the great majority still predominantly exhibits the animal self. An intermediate stage has this mixed in more or less equivalent quantities. And only the wise have the predominance of the human self. And then you can, knowing this, not only avoid being surprised, but also, in some way, in your interactions with people, try to draw out the human self to Iona. I find it interesting how, the way you relate to people, sometimes, with the expectations you create in relation to them, with the way you treat them, forces them to respond at the same level. Therefore, there are various ways to reflect on our interactions. 2. When interacting with others, try to bring out the best in them to Iona. Enter through that gap where you can draw the soul to Iona. Otherwise, the brute will emerge, and you will be met by the brute. And you will engage with the brute, Iona, and this makes life very rough and difficult. So, what will you find on the street? They are beings endowed with these two natures in different measures. There won't be anything different from that. So, don't be surprised. Just work to the best of your abilities to improve yourself. Regarding this equation of the human self and the animal self, and through your example, illuminate the path for others. You shouldn't complain about anyone. Correct the wrongdoer if you can. If you can't, correct the act itself. If you can't even do that, what good are complaints? Nothing should be done without purpose. In other words, our life energy is limited, folks. I don't need to tell you this, it's obvious. If you consider the brevity of a day, by adding up some of these days, you have a year. Adding up 70, 80 of these years, there goes our presence in the world. Life is fleeting. Therefore, we cannot take our limited energy with such a grand purpose ahead of us, which is the construction of ourselves as human beings, and waste it on useless things. I'm not talking about leisure or entertainment here, because that is useful. It is necessary, as long as it is human, that it does not require you to become vulgar. But leisure, rest, is human and necessary. Now, useless things like complaining and lamenting about life's issues do not lessen life's problems, nor do they correct the one who made a mistake. It's a waste of energy and life, which you'll later find lacking for something else. Because we have received a sufficient package to build what is our duty in the world. Wastes will leave you lacking. Certainly, at the end of the equation, something will be missing. Ancient traditions say that a life, if well lived in all its moments, could take a man from absolute ignorance to absolute wisdom. Imagine how much of this path we will be able to walk. And do you know why we will tread so little? Among other things, because we are riddled with waste. Be attentive to this. Life is the most precious gift we have, so why waste it? These are useless things, vices, habits that should be banished. Everything is done with the aim of a useful purpose. The vineyard, the horse, what are you amazed by? Even the sun will tell you, I was created for a purpose. And so, all the other gods. And you, what were you created for? For pleasure. Analyze the concept you have of man and see if reason admits it. Notice that everything was created to serve. Only you were created just to be served. In other words, to enjoy and not to serve. Not to contribute, but merely as a user. That's absurd. That doesn't exist in nature. All beings, their deepest identity lies in the service they provide to the whole. If they do not provide it, they have no identity. They are mere usurpers of energies they did not help to generate. And consider the common logic that a human being has. Something that doesn't serve you for a while. For a relatively long time, that allows me to measure that it will never serve me. That is useless. What do we do with that thing? We throw it away. That's logical. That's intelligent. Do you think that a being that serves nothing and no one, won't nature think something similar about it? Won't it throw it into a great cosmic landfill? Or do you think that we are the only intelligent ones within the manifestation? Think about that. The identity of beings as a group is defined by the service expected of them to the whole. Our identity as humanity. We must serve in the sense of bringing values, virtues, and wisdom to the world. To serve in the sense of humanizing ourselves. And set an example for everyone else, to have a pedagogical life. It's your fault what happens to you, since you prefer to be a good person always tomorrow, instead of today. As if there were things that could be postponed. Oh, you'll start breathing only tomorrow, not today. Obviously, there's no life. My heart will start beating only tomorrow, not today. Well, these things make you lose your physical life. And postponing the duty of being human makes you lose your metaphysical life, which is also serious, also a kind of death. I always remember that phrase from the movie Braveheart, which says that all men die, but not all men truly live. Some just survive. When our human part dies from starvation, we become mere survivors, endowed with instincts, interests, and selfishness. And still with a reason to amplify this selfishness, which makes us dangerous. So, be careful. We cannot postpone until tomorrow the duty of being human. We should place it as the first gift next to our child's crib, teaching them to be human, and carry this gift with us throughout our entire lives. Combat the harmful way of living by repeating to yourself, from now on, it's up to me to banish from my soul vice, ambition, and, in short, everything that disturbs, and seeing things as they are, to use them according to their value. Never forget this power that is natural to you. This is very similar to the epithet in your manual. Exactly the same idea. Never accept any kind of procrastination when it comes to what is essential. In other words, when will I start to realize that I am human and take responsibility for it, placing my actions at the feet of my human self? Within thee, like a sacred altar of my values, of my virtues. When will I start doing this? Now, at this moment. I will try to give the best of myself to you. I will try to be free of vanities, of tendencies. I will try to just give, without any expectation of something in return. Now. Either you do it now or you never will. Once our consciousness touches a reality, it is already committed to it. Knowledge generates commitment. Otherwise, it is not true knowledge. Can the rational being indeed transform any obstacle by truly using it to exercise their own virtue, regardless of the reason for the impediment? Certainly. So, the rational being, in principle, could, when faced with a stone, climb on it and reach a higher level. Or use it to build the foundations of a house, or make many useful things from it, which could contribute to your growth. Well, I don't yet have the level to know how to use all the stones in my life for useful things and to help me grow. So you will have to keep growing, despite it. When we know how to learn from difficulties, we grow because of them. When we don't know, we grow despite them. But, in any case, no obstacle could remove from us the duty to continue growing as human beings. Even at the most advanced points in our lives. Notice how this idea is interesting. There are no excuses for giving up the duty to keep growing. This is real time. Otherwise, it's just clock time, an illusion, and before you know it, it's gone. Your whole life has already passed, without you having truly lived. No one can cloud the normal function of your intelligence, except yourself. Neither fire, nor iron, nor the tyrant, nor slander, nothing can reach it. I remember that historic scene we've heard about so many times, when Galileo had to deny the movement of the earth, forced by a tribunal of the Inquisition. As he steps down the stairs of this tribunal, he says to himself, and yet it moves. What inquisition can stop the intelligence of man? What external force can stop a man's ability to delve into things, seeking their deepest essence, their meaning, their purpose? What obstacle can prevent a man from penetrating the heart of life? Notice that there isn't. Therefore, you should have a sanctuary for this gift, and not delegate it to others, as we generally do. What we hold most precious is the first thing we give away, and then we don't think we are thought. We don't reflect, we don't delve into the knowledge we receive. We become hoarders of information and not well-informed individuals. This requires intelligence. And we become lazy, mentally, which is the worst kind of laziness that can afflict a person. Protect your reason and it will protect you. That's what Epictetus said. Pleasure is understood in its own way by each person. Mine is to have a healthy soul, without aversion to any man, nor to the things that happen to men. On the contrary, I see them with serene eyes, accepting them and giving each its due value. Notice that he is talking about the concept of amor fati. So typical of the Stoics, to love life just the way it is. Not just accept it, but love it. And he says, well, that is my pleasure. You have to realize that your pleasure is not something standardized by society. You have to discover what your pleasure is. Refine your taste, advance your self-knowledge. Discover what your pleasure is, and elevate it, refine it, if it is not so noble. I reiterate for you that little story I often tell in many lectures. When I joined New Acropolis, my teacher told me, at night, close your eyes and try to remember the moment when you were truly happy. I, still very young at the time, closed my eyes and saw a bunch of things, happy hours, a lot of things. I'm not trying to say they are bad, but for me, they brought no pleasure at all. I hit the nail on the head with those events. I never drank, and everyone else did, and you know what it's like to be the only sober person in a crowd of people who are drinking. It was something absolutely unpleasant. And I went along with it because you're young and you have to participate. And I was a bit startled, folks. Where am I truly happy? I went searching, 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 until I found a little point. It was a rose bush that I had dug a little hole for and planted in the garden, added fertilizer, and stayed there with that childlike anticipation, imagining. Will it take root? When will it bloom? And for me, it was striking to realize that I was so disconnected from my own nature that I didn't even know what made me happy. Do you know what truly gives you pleasure? A pleasure that doesn't bring guilt, doesn't lead to a hangover the next day. A pleasure that truly gives you a state of peace in your heart, a sense of accomplishment, allowing you to sleep the sleep of the just. What gives you that kind of pleasure? Stop to search. And if you don't find it, start looking in human acts. Because you were made by nature to be human. It's very likely that in those acts, you'll find your happiness. Refine your sense of pleasure. First, know what it is and then refine it. A man finds pleasure in exercising human values, and a pleasure hardly comparable to any other type of satisfaction. Fleeting, corporeal, whatever it may be. Nothing can happen to a man that is not natural to man. To the ox, nothing that is not proper to the ox. The vine that is not proper to the vine, the stone that is not proper to the stone. So then, if everything that happens to each of us is normal and natural, why do you rebel? Nothing that you couldn't bear. You wanted to impose the common nature. Do you understand this idea? Nothing happens to a man that is not inherent to man. Therefore, nothing happens to Lucia that is not inherent to Lucia. Because I need this experience to grow, I need to make up for mistakes I've made in the past in some way. This is mine. It has a specific address, ICP. It didn't come by chance. One of the fundamental elements in this philosophy is precisely to banish chance. Chance does not exist. Things come because we need them, and if they affect us, it's because they were our size. Remember the example I gave in one of our talks about Marcus Aurelius. And if I throw a ball at you and it's too high for you, it doesn't hit you. If it hit you, it was because it was at your height. The things that affect us are at our height. Therefore, within us lies the power to overcome them, even though, at times, this may not be very clear to us. Thought free from passions is a fortress. The most powerful thing a person can retreat into to become untouchable. Imagine being able to think without any selfishness, without any desire to reach a destination, simply seeking the truth in a pure way. This is a bit of what logic proposes, clean, mathematical. But more than just a mathematical logic, sometimes even a bit of metaphysics also has this capability. To think about my life without, at any moment, contaminating this reflection with anger towards someone, or with feelings of self-pity, or with the desire to interpret things in a certain way that I have always interpreted and don't want to let go of. To examine my life with detachment, as if I were watching a life hypothetically unfolding on a computer screen. And I, armed with my best clarity, will judge this hypothetical life that was created by a computer program. Without wanting to distort events to prove that something you're attached to is true, and what you don't like is false. This is one of the most lucid exercises a person can do. And this allows you to know where you stand. That is part of the equation of identity. If you want to grow, you need two things. To know where you want to go and where you are right now. If you're lost and you call me, asking how to get to my house. At home, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, where are you right now? If you don't know, there's no way I can give you any directions. So, knowing where I am and where I want to go. Clarity allows us to correctly evaluate, including ourselves. It is fundamental, and without it, clarity comes from light. Without it, we walk in the dark. Do not be content with merely connecting to the air around you through breathing. From now on, seek to connect through thought and will to the universal intelligence that encompasses everything, Notice that our body is completely integrated into the environment in order to survive. From it, he takes the air. From it, he takes the water. From it, he takes the food that comes from the earth. Perfectly integrated. Why don't we draw a bit from our own intelligence and also from the universal intelligence? Because if there is a body, the earth, of which ours is a part, wouldn't there also be a body, a universal intelligence, of which ours is a part? And we can exchange with this great body, observing the things it does, how it does them. What is the law behind the works of nature? What is the law behind the way plants live, how animals live? From how a stone is molecularly structured, from an ordinary stone to a precious gem. How does nature do it? What are the laws that I can absorb behind this? These are the footprints of an intelligence much greater than mine, because I haven't learned to communicate with it. As the great philosopher Diogenes would say, the common man needs books. The ignorant man, not ignorant in a pejorative sense, but one who is unaware and seeks to know. The wise person reads in nature, reads directly from nature. Because the laws of the universe are all imprinted around us for a keen reader. This is about making our intelligence communicate with the intelligence of nature, with the manifestation of the world as a whole. Men are born for one another. Educate them, therefore, or tolerate them. Interesting, isn't it? From the very first being you find way back, an anthropoid that wasn't yet sapiens lived in society, lived in community. Man is not a solitary being. Humans, humanity, are a species that live in community, in groups. It is a social being. Therefore, if we are made for one another, we must understand that we either transform ourselves and, from that, transform others, or we tolerate ourselves and others as they are, without complaints, without lamentations, without victimization. You act to transform, or you settle for what you have. At least it's more dignified. I settle and don't complain about anything anymore. The movement of the arrow was different from the movement of the spirit. However, when all precautions are taken, the spirit embarks on the examination of things and its journey. It is no less straight towards the target. Interesting, isn't it? Taking the necessary precautions, not letting myself be contaminated by passions, cutting out all the opinions that exist in my mind, which are tainted by some selfish desire. Under the right conditions, a man who possesses self-knowledge and self-control, when he releases the arrow of his spirit, his wit, his superior intelligence, it goes to its target as straight as an arrow. It vibrates precisely because of the friction with the terrain we create. The terrain is unstable, full of peaks and valleys, of passions, of selfishness, of rejections, of unfounded personal preferences, of unfounded opinions. This makes our spirit incapable of a straight trajectory, because when he is able to do so, very little will be denied to him. When the highest aspect of man, his consciousness, at its peak, combined with willpower, is not hindered. Through the friction of the vulgarities of our personality, it is a force almost like a laser. It hits its target in such a way that it is able to pierce it and continue its course. On the other side, this is willpower combined with a higher consciousness. Book 9 believes that the corruption of the soul is a plague, and more serious than that which comes from the unhealthiness or the alteration of the air that surrounds us. Corruption of the soul is worse than corruption of the body. What kills us is what we hold most sacred, which prevails even after the death of the physical body. This is the plague of animals, the corruption of the body. That is the plague of men, as men. From the moment we corrupt our soul, we are bound to live only dependent on the body. And when it too becomes corrupted, which is inevitable, it's part of the law of life, we are left empty-handed. We haven't built the vessel through which we can continue our journey when that vessel is taken from us. This is Syria, which is a passage I find very beautiful. In the same way, You expect your child to leave the mother's womb. Wait for the moment when your soul will leave its shell. In other words, it's a comparison he makes for us to understand our stance towards death. Life, at a certain moment, is like a seed that must break out of its shell. It must break out of its cocoon. It must come to life. At certain points along the path, this essence of ours will be covered, at others it will be bare, but the journey continues, like a traveler moving through the seasons, walking through the seasons. When it gets cold, he covers himself with a coat. When it warms up, he takes off that coat, but his essence continues moving towards his star, towards the light. So, he says that the process of transformation, where some things are born from others, should be useful for us to fear death less. We don't see abrupt interruptions, we see continuity. We should also understand this in relation to life and death. Whoever sins, sins against themselves. Whoever is unjust to themselves as they become wicked. Those who are unjust, those who commit great moral errors, these individuals. He is hindering his own path. He is stealing from himself the opportunity to give some meaning to his life. No one is more harmed than he is. If someone counts on you and you are unjust to them, they will get hurt, they will suffer, they will experience some loss. But there are always another 7 billion human beings on this planet. She can count on others. She can let go of you. Now, can you let go of yourself? Can you say, I give up on myself? You can't. You will have to keep counting on yourself. And every serious moral failing we have cuts us off at the knees, takes away our resources, and we will have to continue walking with this mutilated body. Nothing and no one is more harmed than ourselves. Notice that. What is happening now? Intelligent beings seem to have lost that attraction, that mutual harmony. Among them, collaboration is no longer noticeable. Even though they want to escape this force, they won't be able to. They will have to return, for nature is more powerful. If you pay close attention, you will see what I mean. It is easier to find a handful of earth isolated from the earth than a man isolated from mankind. In other words, at a certain moment, a handful of earth doesn't want to belong to planet Earth. It's easier to find that than a man who doesn't want to commit to humanity. There is an inexorable law, which is the law of fraternity. We exist for one another, as we mentioned just a moment ago. Then comes selfishness, trying to walk against the law. Of course, every time we want to stray from the path, imagine, we often use this example. In the classroom at New Acropolis, imagine that there are shoulders with elastic walls on either side of this road, on one side and the other. We want to deviate from it, and the more we try to stray, the more this elastic exerts a counterforce. Until we can no longer bear the pain, the pressure, and the elastic pushes us back onto the road. This example that we often, jokingly among ourselves, call the law of the Iona, because you go there and the Iona is thrown back, shows. What will happen with us as human beings, whether selfish or fraternal? Fraternity is the law. We are born for one another. Either you accept the law and flow with it, or you go against it, against the grain. And Iona, going against the law of nature, you, isolated, stand no chance. None. It will only bring more suffering and make your journey longer. As the saying I greatly appreciate goes, a man with God is the majority. A man with the law has his path opened. Going against the grain, the pain is immense. Many accidents can happen along the way. And the law of humanity is fraternity. Today, I overcame all difficulties. Better yet, I expelled them, for they did not reside outside of me, but within me, in my opinions. In other words, evil is not in things, but in the way I relate to them. Knowing how to understand them, knowing how to take the best from them, knowing how to accept the best they can offer me. And what was causing me so much pain in relation to this thing? am not prepared, I don't have enough maturity, and am not trying to have it. To stop creating fantasies, illusions, and projections, almost always selfish in relation to things. Wanting all of them to serve you. Wanting everything to be what you desire, and not what they truly are. Wanting to distort things so they create your ideal and fanciful picture of what is pleasing to you. These opinions, these authoritarian tendencies, this way of relating to the world in an uncompromising manner, are the source of your pain. Expel them, and learn to appreciate everything as a mystery. Understand them, accept them as they are, and help them to be the best they can be. Delve deep into your soul, into the soul of the whole, into that man's soul, into yours, to make it fair and impartial, into the whole, so you don't forget that you're a part of it. Into that man's soul, to know if he acted out of ignorance or consciously, and to remind yourself that he is your kin. Logically, as you delve into the soul of another, you will perceive the level of consciousness that existed in the wrongdoing that was caused. The higher the level of consciousness, the greater the culpability. And, with greater seriousness, the case will have to be addressed, but never thinking that you are going to eliminate this human being. You will eliminate the evil that at this moment enslaves this human being, which resides within him. Remember that saying which goes, when a human being rises, a part of all of us rises along with them. When a human being falls into a deep pit, a part of us falls along with them, and we must rescue them at some point. We cannot move forward, leaving any brother behind. We are one, and no part of our body can be stuck in a hole while the rest of the body moves forward. Therefore, we must consider how we could deeply penetrate our own soul, the soul of the whole, and that of others, to be connected with the spirit of justice and know how to act appropriately in each situation. You have suffered countless evils for. Do not resign yourself to doing only that for which you were created. Put a stop to it now. You have suffered countless evils. Because he would be inert like a stone, ambitious in the pursuit of energies, like a plant, which this generates within us. Greed, for her, it's natural, for us, it's not. Instinctive like an animal. And not be. Valiant like a human being. Conscious like a human being. Wise like a human being. How much have we suffered by trying to fit into molds that were not made for us? And not envisioning this model of the human condition that nature expects from us. And the great void that is created, and the great imbalance that occurs when we do not do what we were made for, what is expected of us? In other words, countless evils. We have already suffered by trying to fit into a mold that is not that of a complete human being. In a word, either there is an intelligent and provident God, and all is well, or everything is governed by chance, and you, at least, should not govern yourself in this way. What an interesting thing, you know. I've already told you that Stoicism really liked logic. Marcus Aurelius uses it a lot. Well, there are only two possibilities. Either there is an intelligent God, and life is all ordered, or this intelligent God doesn't exist, and life is chaotic. If life is all chaotic, and this is a reason for great suffering, at least be an exception, don't be chaotic. Be orderly, place values above impulses, place reason above passions, align your conduct more and more with the best you have, reflect in an unbiased way, know how to use knowledge as formation and not just information. If you are cosmos, you can be a promoter of cosmos around you, because when one part becomes ordered, it calls upon the surrounding parts, creating an ever greater order to interact with it. In other words, even in a crazy scenario where we consider that there is no order anywhere, no, there will be order somewhere, there will be order within me. If I'm in this room and I say, there is no pen in this room, and Luana tells me, no, I have a pen backstage, I can no longer say, in this house there is no pen, because she has one. In this world, there is no order. Yes, I have one. So, this world has order. and the place an ordered point. It's a seed. From there, many things can bear fruit. One way or another, bring order to your life. In the face of what comes from an external cause, remain impassive. In what has its cause within you, righteousness. In short, determination in action, aiming for the good of society, which is what your nature calls for. Remember that passage, where it says there are two kinds of things that affect us, those that depend on us and those that don't. Those that don't depend on us, like whether it rains or it's cold, whether people treated me well or poorly, whether the day was pleasant or unpleasant, whether people were sad or happy, there are certain things that don't depend on us. But what does depend on me is the reaction I had to all these things, the response I gave to all these things. Therefore, those things that don't depend on me shouldn't shake me at all. But from the moment those that depend on me, if I didn't know how to act coherently, that indeed would be a reason for sadness. That, indeed, should be the focus of my concern. The world will always have diversity. The manifested universe is dual. As long as there is light, there will be darkness, the small, the large, the soft, the resilient. The world will always be dual. We must be able to stay true to ourselves, regardless of the conditions of the road. What do you consider a good car? An excellent, resilient car. One that drives on a paved road without any problem at a good, suitable speed. But if you put it on a bumpy dirt road, it slows down. But it doesn't stop, it doesn't hold back, it keeps moving. Isn't that right? You buy that fancy 4x4. The most difficult, except in very extreme cases, the toughest roads. It makes it to the other side, it reaches 20. A regular road would reach 80, but neither one nor the other stops it. It knows how to keep moving. Is there really such a different criterion for talking about a good car or a good man? There are certain things that are common laws for all manifestations. Are the gods powerless or powerful? If they are powerless, why do you pray? If they are powerful, why don't you ask them to grant you what you wish? Fear nothing, desire nothing, and let nothing trouble you, instead of asking to be given this or freed from that. Or in other words, if there are no gods, it's not worth praying. If they exist, gods or God, according to the belief of each historical moment, and they truly are powerful and can give you something, ask for something worthwhile. Ask for more self-control. Ask to have more clarity to decide the important things in your life. Are you going to ask to have things and to stop having things? This is mere illusion. This is fanciful. None of these things are truly yours. I always remember the Ramayana, that great Hindu epic, where at the end it says, ask Rama for whatever you want, but be careful. Don't ask for too little. Do you understand this? In the presence of a magnificent being, are you going to ask for trifles? Are you going to ask for a new car? That captivates you. Ask him for something that is worthy of him and worthy of you on the most real level of your identity. Having positively practiced good, what more could you want? Doesn't it satisfy you to have acted according to your nature? It's like the eyes demanding a salary to see. Our feet to walk. In other words, doing good, being just, being honest, and staying cheerful, waiting. Whoever is going to take a picture and post it on social media, it means you're wanting a reward for doing what is your duty. So, start paying your feet for walking, your eyes for seeing. It's evident that when you do what is inherent to your nature, you couldn't expect anything else but the satisfaction of having done it. Fulfillment is in the act itself, not in what you will gain or avoid losing from it. The greatest reward for someone who was virtuous is simply being. There is a poem that talks a lot about this, which I find quite interesting. The greatest reward of being human is simply being. And know what comes is later. What could be as good as an act of justice? An act of kindness. What could come after that is better than this? Notice that sometimes we are reversing things. Maybe to gain fame, ill gain fame too, with that, acquire a virtue. That would be worth it. But having a virtue to gain fame, you're exchanging trash for a treasure of incalculable value. Be careful with the exchanges you make and the value you assign to things. Well, for today, this is our chat. Here ends the lecture. Here begins your reflection. Read it again on your own. Recall the comments that were made, in such a way that this book doesn't leave you the same as it found you. May we come out of experiences a little bigger on the other side. This means they were well lived. We cannot leave at the same stature as we entered. And this is a book that has the potential for that. Thank you very much and see you next time.